Welcome back to the 2020 Presidential Race Review. I'm your host, Jessica Kwong, and I still have with me Republican speechwriter Lisa Schifrin. And we have a new guest. He's a historian, a lecturer for Columbia University. His name is David Eisenbach. So we want to start off by going back into the history of this. This is the second time that Bernie Sanders is going for the Democratic nomination. In 2016, Hillary Clinton captured that. So what are your thoughts on his second time around? Do you think he's going to get it this time or not?
Well, I think he's going to win the majority of the votes in the primaries and caucuses going into the convention. But that's not enough to actually get the nomination. It was very interesting in the prior debate. When asked, he was the only one that said we should go by what the voters in the primaries and caucuses want. Because they all know he's the only one that really can win the highest total number of votes. Yeah.
Do you think that he's going to, you said you're not sure if he's going to get the nomination this time around. I mean, is there someone else you
it's
think
interesting. I mean, we tend to think as Americans that, of course, whoever gets the highest number of votes should be the nominee. But it was only until recent times, as a historian, recent times, in 1972, that the Democratic Party adopted the policy of having primaries and caucuses decide who gets sent to the convention to choose the presidential nominee. In 1968, Hubert Humphrey didn't enter a single primary, and he got the nomination. And the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968 was an absolute fiasco. So the Democrats adopted a very democratic nomination process, and we got George McGovern, who was much to the left of the average American voter, calling for an end to war on drugs, for, at the time, gay rights, which was considered a fringe issue. And we got absolutely clobbered in 1972. After the drubbing that we got with Jimmy Carter in 1980, the Democratic Party said, you know what, we need to have super delegates who will make sure that it's not a fringe candidate who is our nominee, and somebody who's not as much of an outsider in Washington, D.C. like Jimmy Carter. So the super delegates were invented to kind of control the Democratic process.
Is this a system that you think works? What do you think, Lisa?
Well, I think ironically, I don't know about the super delegates. I think the problem with super delegates is that they can kind of be bought or persuaded the way Hillary Clinton did. They can be manipulated. The old system, in the 19th century and early 20th century of smoke-filled rooms and party bosses, which was, rightly overthrown by both parties because it lends itself to certain kinds of corruption, and it certainly is not representative. Nevertheless, you didn't end up with no candidate or with somebody from another party or with a socialist. You got somebody who people thought had an actual shot at winning. So that's a real thing. I don't think Bernie would be anybody's choice. I'm not sure we can go back to that. In fact, I'm pretty sure we can't. And I think sometimes a funny thing happens. Bernie is compared often to Trump in his having very strong and forceful views, a very loyal following. Trump didn't have a loyal following to start with. He had to build that. It all came together, I think, mostly over policies. Policies you may not like, but policies.
That some people believed in, like the border.
The border, a bunch of things. Certainly the economy coming out of the Obama years, but for the Republicans in 2016, with all of those choices, Trump was a statement about where a large part of the party wanted to go. And whether you like it or not, that was as democratic as it gets. I mean, it was in fact populist. And I don't think that's quite the same thing with Bernie. I think Bernie is in a crowded field. He's getting more votes than anyone, but not because more Democrats are socialists than are anything else. Only because if you are a socialist or if you find him attractive, it's easy for him to attract all those votes. And pushing Elizabeth Warren out of the way, that's a thing that people have done strategically. They've said, she can't win, maybe he can, I'm voting for him. I do think we need a better selection process because this is nonsense, but I don't see what that is.
It's not, look, Bernie is the outsider candidate in the Democratic field, just like Trump was the outsider. The Republican establishment was against Donald Trump. Fox News was against Donald Trump, and he took that party. And Bernie looks like he's going to do the same thing. Now, the irony is that the Republicans are actually more democratic in how they allot their delegates when it comes to their presidential conventions. The Democrats are the one with this kind of party boss, super delegate capacity that can shut down a rebel contender. So, and that I think is a problem for the Democratic Party, because if they turn their back on the candidate who wins the most amount of votes, Bernie Sanders, and they nominate somebody like Mike Bloomberg, right, there's going to be revolt in the Democratic Party. It will be a disaster for the Democratic Party. I think that's the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party.
Well, you know what? Don't you think the Democratic Party has kind of outlived its usefulness?
I think both parties have.
Well,
I
in a lot of
I think
ways.
Donald Trump transformed the Republican Party, and I think Bernie will transform the Democratic Party, because the fact of the matter is that under both parties, the middle class has shrunk. It has continued to be decimated, and people are sick of hearing from the elites that they don't believe anymore, whether it's the elites on CNN, the New York Times, Fox News. They would rather get their information from somebody they actually believe in.
You know, I just want to say, we do not consider Fox News elite. We might like them, we might not, but we don't consider them.
Well, they have a tower in Rock Center, and they are owned by billionaires.
They're a big company,
so,
yes.
And they tell you what the billionaire class wants you to think, right? And that's true of all of these media enterprises. And the fact of the matter is that the day is done for the media elites and the party elites to decide who gets to be America's leadership.
Well, Donald Trump really appealed to the people. He's got a really strong following now. So of all the Democratic candidates, which one do you think most appeals to the people? Is it Bernie or is
Bernie? I mean, we know that by the numbers. And we know that it's not just college students. It's not just highly educated white people. When you look at, the Nevada caucuses, in the casino caucus areas, right, mostly Latinos, they went for Bernie. Bernie's got appeal that goes across the Democratic political spectrum.
But is it strong enough to defeat Trump, his following? And
it's all about the stock market.
Well, wait,
Where's the stock market in November of 2020? That will tell you who gets to be the next president of the United States.
This is the point I was trying to make about the Democratic Party being at a breaking point, because there really is a hard left and a soft left, and then there's the whole middle, the whole, moderate Democrats who are progressive on many things that used to be considered extreme are now absolutely central in American life, and nobody would question them. People oppose abortion, but nobody's shocked by it. Gay rights, all sorts of minority issues that were a big deal in 1968 that are now just routine all around, totally accepted by everything. There is a large moderate part of the Democratic Party of all races and all classes, oddly enough. And then there's this hard left. And those two things can't coexist in one party. So I think that's what you're looking at there.
Well, if we go by labels, right, socialist, right, but if you actually go by policies, you do have across the board support for Medicare for all in the Democratic Party. Bernie's plan to provide free childcare, the no tuition at public colleges and community colleges, right? Those actually have broad-based support within the Democratic Party. So when you look at him in terms of his policies, he's totally in line with the majority. On labels,
See, I don't know. I mean, I think the policy of free stuff, which I used to think of as the politics of the trough, that will always be popular with lots of people who are not thinking through things like cost and what it would do to a society to take money from some people or to, relieve the debt of some people while other people have actually worked very hard to pay theirs off.
Right? As long as the debt is being increased for tax cuts, Republicans have no problem with that. But it's when we want to actually spend the money on things like a Green New Deal or health care for all Americans, that's when they get excited about deficits. Right? And so Americans have heard that line before, and they're no longer buying it.
See, I would just say that is a split in the Republican Party, the deficit hawks and the deficits don't matter.
Who's at the head of that party?
Well,
Donald Trump doesn't care about deficits.
Okay, that's true, but to the extent that there are splits on economic policy in the Democratic Party, that's also true among Republicans. And I think the thing that most conservatives hold most strongly against Donald Trump's governance is his disregard for deficits, because really bills will come due.
David, you've seen many presidential races. From what you see right now, do you think that Donald Trump's going to get reelected? Is there a strong enough
Depends on the
Democrat
stock
candidate?
market. It really does. That will decide this election. That's why Donald Trump was so nervous about this coronavirus.
Right,
why he
because
was
it's
on
affecting the
tonight
stock.
because he saw that it dropped 2,000 points in a couple of days. And so if the Dow is above 25,000 points, I don't think there's any chance that Democrat wins.
And would you
Below
change that?
25,000 points, then it's in play. Below 20 points, then
Would that change if there were
Democrat
different
wins.
candidates? If there was all of a sudden some candidate you really believed everyone was behind? Would
No,
that
I
change?
think that people are so tied into the stock market, whether they actually own any stocks or not. The
And the
economy
economy.
now is so focused on the stock market that the throw whoever is Donald Trump out will just take off. It'll be very similar to what we saw in 2008.
Oh, I don't think so. Because 2008 was a transition year anyway. I mean, in that year, the odds that a Republican was going to win were very low going in. Because after 8 years, we throw that team out.
If the stock market takes a hit, typically stock markets drop about 40% in any given drop, and we're certainly due for a crash.
The due
stock
for a crash
market
thing is very
drives-
different than the idea of a pandemic.
If the stock market dives 40%, Donald Trump's toast. It doesn't matter. They could
It
be,
kind
it could
of
be
depends on
Buttigieg,
your-
it could be Klobuchar, it could be
Yeah,
Bernie.
I think
He's
it does
toast.
matter because both Buttigieg and Klobuchar and several of those others, nobody looks at them and says, "Oh, you're the person who's going to get the stock market roaring."
Yeah, but Donald Trump owns the stock market. He's been talking
No,
about the
I
stock market.
certainly agree that he needs to
you
keep
live
it
by the stock market, you're going
going.
to die by the stock market. And if it crashes, and there's a good chance it will, because the timing is...
cycles
The
and
cycle and the
cycles.
That
business.
is
We haven't
wishful
defeated
thinking.
the business. It's definitely not wishful thinking. I would never wish something like that. But the fact of the matter is, the prices of the stocks are way disproportionate to the earnings. The price-earnings ratio is
How about
way
the
out of whack.
coronavirus? Is that just an extra, or is it going to?
The coronavirus could be the straw that breaks the camel's
straw?
back. I mean, if
Okay.
we're actually looking at a pandemic within the United States, people are going to restrict spending. They're going to restrict travel. Factories will not shut down. Classes won't meet.
I think
They're
Trump
out of
said that
school.
tonight.
It could be quite
in
disastrous.
his talk. He said, "Look,
he's cut
this
funding
is
to
not
the
going to
CDC.
be. There's not going to be a lot of growth this year because this is going to have real ramifications around the world." So I think that's clear. I think the question with a pandemic is different than the stock market. It is, who do you trust to manage it in a way that will keep
Well, the stock
keep the
market,
costs
look,
down, keep
Donald Trump,
deaths
when he was
down.
running for president, was absolutely right. The stock market is a big, fat, ugly bubble. It has gotten fatter and has gotten uglier under Donald Trump. This thing is just waiting to be popped. And the question is, what pops it? The coronavirus is something that definitely could do that.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more on the 2020 presidential race review. Welcome back to the 2020 presidential race review. I'm Jessica Kwong, and I'm here with Republican speechwriter Lisa Schifrin and also Columbia University lecturer in history, David Eisenbach. We're going to continue to talk about the presidential race, and the debate just happened in Charleston. There were seven candidates, and one of the questions that came up was, each candidate should give up their motto as well as some misconceptions about them. And I noticed that three candidates answered in sort of a joking way. Biden said, "I have more hair on my head than I have more hair than I think I do." Warren said that I don't eat that much, and Bloomberg said that I'm 6 feet tall. So when you get a question like that from a host saying, what are some misconceptions, I think that's really an opportunity to address a misconception. they seem to take it as a joke. So what do you think about that?
It's
I mean,
hard.
we had
Those-
Bernie. We
yeah.
had Bernie who said, that he's too progressive and progressive ideas don't sell. So I feel like he had a more honest answer to that. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I think kind of cute questions like that are like the hardest questions because you
they really
don't
reveal
practice
something.
them. I mean, who walks around with a motto? I mean, you know what I mean?
Right. That's what I was watching it, and I thought, what is my motto? A motto?
What normal person
I
has
have
a
some
motto?
values,
You could
but
also
not
say
a
your,
motto.
you could say your campaign slogan, right?
Yeah, I know,
right?
yeah.
No.
No, I think the safest thing was what I think Elizabeth Warren did, which is give a Bible quotation.
Right. I mean,
But maybe
it
not for
always
maybe
works,
not
right?
for
It's
Democrats. I don't know.
But if you're running in South Carolina,
That might. You're right. You're right.
yeah.
We were talking earlier about these Democratic debates. Lisa, you're saying that there's 7 people you don't really get into policy. I mean, what are some of the questions you would like these candidates to answer? What do you want to know about them? Or do you think we're just going back to the same topics, climate, housing?
Yeah.
Are we getting anywhere with these
You
Democratic
know what?
debates?
Here is a topic that I think our country needs to address that, in fact, Mayor Bloomberg had to deal with, and he did some good things and some bad things. I would like to see Democrats talk about urban violence, and in particular, the kind of violence that we see excessively in minority neighborhoods, and in particular in Democrat-run cities, Baltimore, Detroit, parts of Chicago, parts of New York. And New York is on the better side of this. Downtown DC. I think
Philadelphia.
I would love to hear what Democrats have to say about that in a constructive way.
Yeah. You know what the problem is that the moderators don't ask about urban issues. And I think this has a lot to do with the Electoral College system because it heavily sort of weighs the suburbs and rural states over urban areas. That if you're running for president, specializing in urban issues, it's not going to win you any electoral swing state votes.
Look, that's true, and especially because the urban poor of all races don't vote. They have the lowest voter turnout of anyone. So
And the Democrats have taken them for granted, and the Republicans have written them off.
That's
and
right.
As a result,
That's right.
there's no discussion about those issues.
But also, fear of political incorrectness is huge, and it's very easy to slip, on those issues, and to say something that is either true and not nice, or ugly and not even necessarily true. So, Bloomberg's having to deal with his, throw them up against a wall and whatever, beat them till their guns fall out of their pockets. I don't know. I think there are I'd like to know what the Democrats want to do about all these wars that we want to end, the ending of which will not, in fact, create peace. It's one thing to say, get out of Iraq, but Iraq is going to be a trouble spot for some time to come. It's one thing to say, don't kill people in Iran. I myself think you should have taken out their terrorist leader, but tell me what you're going to do. This is a real problem. And if not a one person on that stage actually has significant foreign policy experience.
And the
That's
lack
an
of
issue.
questions about foreign policy. I mean, that is one area where the president does have monopoly power, right? It's not like you come in there and say free pre-K for everybody, right? You need the Congress to go along with you. But in terms of foreign policy, that is where a president has the most power. And yet they don't have to answer any questions about foreign policy.
What do you think about election interference? So we knew about that for the 2016 election. Now it's become a huge topic. Could it happen again? Did it happen before? As a historian, what do you
But
think?
I want to say this. We learned a fabulous thing about election interference last night from Michael Bloomberg, who pointed out that he personally had bought, he used the word bought, I bought 21, you got 40 new Democrats. I bought 21 of those seats. You know what? That is oligarchical election interference. I don't
But
care that
that's
he's an American.
domestic.
Yes, and it's legal. That doesn't mean it's either good or democratic or representative or appropriate.
And
it is shocking. It is way worse than anything that China or Russia, both of which wish us some harm, have ever achieved.
And at every commercial break, then seeing a commercial from Mike Bloomberg. I mean, what kind of a debate?
Right.
Isn't there some ethical sort
You know
of
what? I thought
question
there was
there?
actually a rule that you can't do that.
I thought so too, or
But
at least there should be. So yeah, it's our fault if we allow some Russian bots on Facebook to determine our election. I
it
don't think
happen
that was the
before,
cause.
or was-
I don't think that was the cause
We didn't have
of our
social
loss in
media then.
2016. We had a lousy candidate. We had a candidate who was saying that America isn't a crisis, the middle class isn't a crisis, and I don't think he addressed that during his presidency, but a whole other discussion. Hillary Clinton never talked about how the fact that the middle class is shrinking, and that's why she lost. It
Also,
wasn't Russian
Hillary
bots.
Hillary is just, you know, she's just
You don't like Hillary.
unlikable. No, it's not that I don't like her, which I don't. It's that she's not likable. And at the end of the day, certainly when I was a reporter covering politics, the silly thing reporters always said to each other was, the guy who wins is the guy you'd want to go bowling with or have lunch with. And
Personable.
it's not ever going to be Hillary Clinton. I don't know if it's going to be Bernie Sanders, but it's certainly not going to be Hillary Clinton.
Who's the most controversial candidate? Is it Bloomberg now, or?
Oh, yes. I think with the end, the non-disclosure agreements and the
taxes,
comments
not
that he
releasing
was
the
saying,
taxes.
you know, that the fact we still haven't heard everything, but what we have heard is ugly. And for a Democrat trying to win a nomination with the Democratic voter, it's not going to fly. I'm shocked that he's still holding his polling.
Right, that is the one thing that I have loved, watching Elizabeth Warren rake him over the coals like a prosecutor.
always goes after
You know,
him, she
I
does.
find her shrill and horrible for the most part, but with this, she's just been brilliant. It's been fabulous.
And it's been really good for her. It's kept her in the race because
But
she's
she's
been able to
still
raise money that's going to keep her going through Super Tuesday.
If it was between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who do you think would have a stronger chance against Trump? No.
Neither, so Bernie. I think Democrats aren't going to vote for Elizabeth Warren. And the reason I think that is because that's what I've seen.
She's trying
Yeah.
to pitch herself as like Bernie now, right? But that she's more capable. and
Yeah.
she's
You know,
younger.
I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago making an unusual for me feminist point, and that is this. For the very first time, we actually have a woman who is a serious, though not first-tier candidate for president in the Democratic Party, who is what feminists expected female candidates would be. A woman who, on merit, got to Yale and the University of Chicago Law School, worked at law firms, was elected prosecutor, became a political leader, was elected to the Senate from her state. That is the kind of pathway. Maybe you want some different particulars, executive experience, foreign policy experience. Nevertheless, Klobuchar really is a, up by your bootstraps, serious traditional candidate. She's not coming in from some other field. She's not somebody's ex-girlfriend.
Doesn't
she's
have
not,
the baggage
she's not
of
a wife.
Clinton.
Well, no, but Clinton should never have been there because she would not have been there had her husband not been Bill. It's fabulous that the pipeline has now produced somebody who is in her own right a serious candidate. Elizabeth Warren could have, should have been that, and she's not. The fact that she lied for 30 years about being an Indian and got
American.
academic appointments.
That's a problem.
That is a huge
Right,
problem,
it's a
and
huge
Trump
problem.
got her on that.
It is, in fact, disqualifying because the fact that she tells these lies and is called on the business about being removed from her job as a teacher because she was pregnant, that's been disproved. And she told
she's
that
still
story
talking
again
about
last
it,
night.
right, she talked
so
about it
she's,
again.
there's a screw loose there. Oh, do
you think she's boring?
Yeah,
She's
she's
boring.
boring.
Right?
So she's not going to
My
win because
kids
of
look at her
that.
and they say, she's like a soccer mom.
Yeah, she's.
But
Yeah.
a soccer mom can be, she's a soccer mom with a prestigious, serious academic qualifications and 20 years in the Senate. And who,
It's not enough to
But
win.
it's
She's
not gonna get the
firecracker.
boots on the ground that are necessary to get out that vote.
I mean, can you
Now,
imagine
right?
her debating
now.
Trump? Can you
And-
imagine
I think
her?
she is the best placed person coming out of this race, I think, for 2024, if she hires some good coaches and speechwriters. No,
Something
really,
that's
there
more
are 4
animating.
million. I could send her the names of 4 million speech coaches in New York City who could fix her inability to speak.
And Trump himself had said that he thought that she was a strong candidate, right? He mentioned that. So
I also think because she's so earnest and so uncharming, she wouldn't let Trump be charming and jokey. And that would be really unpleasant to watch for all of us.
Well,
but it would hurt him because he needs somebody who we can play off of.
Trump is on record, and there's a recording of him saying that he would not have lost to Bernie in 2016.
really,
Yeah.
Wait, he would not have.
Would not have lost to Bernie. If the Democrats nominated Bernie, Bernie would have beaten him. There's no way Trump wins Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Wow, okay.
And so Trump knows that Bernie he's a fighter and he can throw a Sunday punch. And while Elizabeth Warren could get into the details of policy, that's not Trump's game. Trump's game is, it's a boxing match. And in a boxing match, anything can happen. So I think Bernie's got the best shot at beating Trump. And
Okay.
Trump knows
It is a little bit problematic with Bernie, aside from his actual views, that his first job, his actual first paying job, was at the age of 41, where he became the mayor of Burlington or something.
That's older than Pete Buttigieg.
He has,
Yeah.
you know, he's on his third wife, but his only child was born to a woman he dated but didn't marry. And
Okay,
the point
but
of this
he's
is-
running against Donald Trump. He's
No,
also
no,
on his
wait,
third
wait.
wife.
The point of
funny.
this is that woman was on welfare for her whole adult life, bringing up that kid because he did not go to work to support that kid.
Well, I'm
That's
sure
a different,
Donald
that's a
Trump
real
has his
different
own
story.
angry
He has
wife
other
stories.
issues.
So
He
I don't
definitely-
think Donald Trump wants to go down
Bernie
that
wins
road
this
either.
round, right?
That's for sure. That's for sure.
I actually think that's the one thing Donald Trump did. He married his pregnant girlfriend, gave the baby a name, and then they got divorced.
Not exactly the exemplar of family values that the Republican
is-
Party was trying to push
It
down our
is-
throats for
It is
decades.
very, very Hollywood.
Thank God that's over.
Well, but I agree. Nobody really thinks that we're electing our favorite minister. We're
Yeah.
electing a vehicle to push policies and to make things happen.
That's it. That's it. And I think that there is a stark difference between what Bernie stands for and what Trump stands for. And it's not going to be about, you know, their family values and their family histories or even about their past job experience. This will be an ideological battle.
We're going to end this debate style. What are your closing remarks? Let's start with you, David.
I hope the Democrats don't try to go back to the past of the bosses making the decision on who their nominee is. If Bernie wins the most votes, they got to go with Bernie. He's got the young people behind him. He's got, and he will have proven that he can at least get a huge number of votes. You definitely don't want to destroy the party with this revolt from the elite.
Okay, what do you think, Lisa?
The opposite. The best thing that could happen to the Democratic Party going forward is that it break into two ideological factions. The left can go off and be whatever it wants to call itself, the Socialist Party, and you can have Democrats who are, you know, normal Americans who are not pro-Soviet, pro-Iran communists.
The best thing for the Democratic Party is the end of the Democratic Party, in other words.
You know what? Yes, in a sense, there's a party waiting to be born,
Yeah.
and it will be a stronger party.
Well, thank you both for joining me today, and thanks everyone for tuning in to the 2020 presidential race review. We'll be back next time.